Well, the finishing is all done, and now I'm getting ready to actually assemble the mantle, glue the mortise and tenons and so forth. Before I do that, I have to do a little behind-the-scenes work. I'm going to be installing some vertical pillars to help support the bottom plank more than just what the walnut mortise and tenons will do. And so the first thing, I have to locate where those pillars are going to go. And obviously they can't go where the braces are coming out of the fireplace front, those 2x10 braces. So I've got to mark where those braces are going to be. And I've taken my caliper again. You recall that this is what I made actually from the fireplace. And I marked where the braces were when I did the measurements. And I'm just going to transfer those marks to the planks so I know that, hey, that area there is something I got to stay away from because there's going to be a brace holding up the mantle. Okay, now these vertical supports I'm talking about are going to go behind the curved laminate. You recall we veneered this a while back. I've made some marks now to show me where the edges of the walnut pillars are going to be, and I made some marks on the laminate where they should intersect with the walnut, and if I just line this up I can get a pretty good idea of where these will fall. And then I just need to mark, get this right, need to mark with a pencil the inside. So what this tells me is I can pretty much do anything I want back here. It's not going to be seen from the front because you're looking at the back of the mantle, and the those vertical 2x10 pieces, which I'm representing with this board, they're going to sit just like that. This is the part that will make any woodworker's palms sweat. It's the glue up. We're going to be gluing up all the mortise and tenon joints at one time so that we can make sure that the mantle planks are properly aligned. And I'll be using some of those spacer blocks I just showed you to make sure that the tops remain at the right separation angle. The idea, we want two parallel surfaces exactly 10 inches apart. And in that way, later, after the glue is set, we'll be able to slide in the curved laminates, which will also be trimmed to exactly 10 inches in height. And that'll be it. So I've pre-staged all the walnut pillars. I've got the planks in the correct alignment. Here's the top plank. I've marked it so I don't make a mistake and put something in upside down. I've also got the planks on spacer blocks up off the bench. I've put some clear packing tape on the spacer blocks so if there's any glue squeeze out, it won't stick to the blocks and have the blocks stick to the plank. We've got the glue already, lots of glue in a container with a brush, and let's get going. Okay, I've got all the pillars in place, all glued up. Now I've got to install the wedges, and I have to work fast. Plus I got to make sure I get all the glue squeezed out as I go. I've been working on that. I'll start with the big wide ones first. All I'm going to do is just dip them in the glue, wipe off the excess, put them in the slots. Hope they fit. Well, the glue has had an entire 24 hours to cure, and now I'm going to cut off the wedge excess. I'm using a flush cut saw. This is a saw where the set of the teeth is only in one direction, so the back side here is very flat. The idea is it's not supposed to scratch your wood. It's also got a very flexible blade, so you can hold it in close like this. And just cut off your wedges. I'm planing down the part of the tenons that is proud. I try to cut these tenons to be just slightly proud of the finished mantle, so that I wouldn't have to cut much off. But I do have to plane down. I'm using a low angle plane. It's got a 25-degree bevel plane iron with about a 12-degree bed. So what is that, 37 degrees angle of attack. And I like this plane. It works good on the push. Does not have to have a chipper or anything like that. It's a bevel up type plane. Now here's a little something you can do if you are planing off these tenons or plugs or anything like that, then you don't want to take a chance of damaging the surface. Just put a little bit of this clear packing tape, very thin plastic tape, around where you're going to plane, and that way your plane's resting on that, and if the plane picks up a little bit of tape, you know you're pretty close to the surface and you can stop, and it doesn't damage the surface any. This is the back panel, and it's going to be screwed onto the vertical pillars with 3 screws, but this piece is going to grow and shrink seasonally, so I've got to make the end screw holes elongated. To do that, I'm using a special bit. It's actually a router type bit, but I'm using it in the drill press. It's got a countersink on it, and it's got a cutting blade, and I can both countersink a hole for a screw, and I can also move the work slightly and have the hole become elongated. Quarter number 8 stainless steel flathead screws, and so I'll just go ahead and get my 1/8 inch pilot bit roughly centered in the hole. Go ahead and drill my pilot. And bring it on home. Now I'll leave this just a little bit at the snug point so that the wood can move. This next operation is a little dicey. You've got to be careful with this. I'm going to cut the bent laminated parts to the correct height, which is 10 inches. Now, to do this, because it's a curved part, you have to feed the wood in and change the elevation of the part you're holding to keep the point of contact with the table right in front of the blade. Also, you don't want any tear out on the veneer, so I've laid down a piece of 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard and brought the blade up through that to form a zero clearance insert so that there'll be full support of the work right up to the edge of the blade. Now when it gets hairy is when you get to the point where your opposite end is starting to become kind of heavy, and it's difficult to hold this down safely and push it through the blade at the same time. So what I've done is I've made a support here that will assist me. Now it's very easy to push. I simply have to do a forward motion. I don't have to push down at all. And I've set these blocks just right so that the point of contact with the table is right in front of the blade. And so I just run it through like that. Alright? And then what I'll do is when I get to this point, I'll just cut off the saw motor, just hold this, and let the saw blade stop. I won't try to pull it back out through the saw, because that could bind, and I'm not going to try to push it all the way through because that's just unstable looking. So it's an operation that can be done safely, but you have to have the right setup to do that. I'm going to go ahead and measure this out to 10 inches exactly. I've already trued up one side of this, one edge. So we'll set the fence to 10 inches. Now you might also notice that with this setup you can't use a blade guard or a riving knife. So it's important to really be careful with this operation. But you end up with a nice clean parallel edge. You should be in good shape. Now I've got to cut the laminations to the right length. And these faces have to be perpendicular to the front face of the mantle. So that's kind of a tricky cut on a curved piece. What I've done is, first thing I made a story stick. This is a stick that's exactly the width of the opening. So I can use this to measure and make sure I get my cuts right. Now I'm using a sliding crosscut sled. It's got a very true fence. And the first thing I did was I cut these pieces, the two of them, a little bit oversized so I could get rid of a lot of the waste. The problem is this: if you want this face to be perpendicular to the front of the mantle, then this edge over here has to be flat on the face of the crosscut sled at its cut line. Just think about that for a moment. If this end here is long, then that tilts the whole piece up a little bit and makes this angle incorrect. So I cut off the most, an inch or so of the waist, and now I'm cutting right up to about a 1/16 of an inch from my final cut line. Then I'll flip the piece around and cut the other end to exact length, because I think being very, very close on this will enable me to have the correct angle. It'll lay down flat enough where I'll get the correct angle. So that's how I'm going to do it, and that's very safe. I've got the piece clamped on to the fence. I've got a block back here, a stop block, to help register this, and I'll just slide that into the saw, keeping my hands well away from the blade. In order to connect the laminate to the mantle, I'm going to use countersunk screws, 3 on each side. I'm using number 8 1.25" with a countersunk head, and I'll go ahead and I'll put them in like that. I've already drilled the 11/64 hole. Now all I got to do is countersink the back of the hole. and then we'll be ready to install. I've got a little countersink bit in my drill. See, that's how it goes. Very nice. Okay, now you can see the laminated pieces in place. I spent a couple minutes deciding which direction to put these, with the center pointing up and the other two joints pointing down, or vice versa. I finally decided center pointing up looked better, pointing up towards the heavens. And then we can see how this attaches in the back. You can see those screws that I countersunk, and the back panel. Normally I finish the back of my furniture because it's meant to be in the center of the room, but for this particular piece, meant to be firmly attached to a fireplace, I decided that would just be an extra step and I could save my clients a little bit of money without doing that. Alright. This is one of the blocks that I'll be putting behind the where I just installed the lamination, and it's designed to give a little more strength to that bottom mantle piece so that it doesn't over time sag. So it's essentially a tension element. It's going to have two screws going into the bottom mantle plank and two screws going into the top. And so I'm making a pocket hole, which is a hole that comes in at an angle where the tip of the screw comes right out the center of the bottom. And so I'm using a 3/8 inch drill bit. I've clamped the piece to the fence, to the table of my shopsmith, and I'm going to use that to make the countersink to get me some depth so that the head of the screw will be down here somewhere. Bit of friction there. After I do all these countersinks, I'll put a smaller diameter bit in here for the size of the screw shank and drill on all the way through, and that'll be that. And using a long drill bit, 3/16, I'll go the rest of the way. Now the mantle is going to be resting on two beams that come out of the front of the fireplace and extend, about 7.5 inches or so up underneath here. But to make sure that the mantle is very secure, I'm also going to hold it down with some lag bolts, 3/8 inch diameter lag bolts. I'm going to place one here and one for the corresponding position on the other support. And I'm going to countersink with a 1-inch diameter Forstner bit. I'm going to countersink 1 inch, and then I'll drill through with a 3/8 inch bit. And after this is all assembled in place in the home, I'll plug the hole with a 1-inch diameter plug, which I'll be cutting. So now the tricky part is to make sure that the hole is perpendicular. The axis of the hole is perpendicular to the face, and of course I can't put this in a drill press. That would be ideal. So I'm going to have to do this pretty much by eyeballing. The next step is to cut plugs that'll go into the holes that I just drilled into the mantle top. And so I've got a piece of maple from the tree that we used, and I've pre-finished it. I've got the coloration the same as on the top, and now I'm going to cut a series of plugs with a 1-inch plug cutter. This is a carbide tipped single cutter plug cutter. Everything is clamped to the drill press table. I've got this set at a low speed. I'm going to go down about 5/8 of an inch and cut in various locations, and then run this through the bandsaw to get the plugs free. And then I'll have a number of plugs so I can get one, for each hole that matches up very well. So here's the finished plug. It's a little bit undersized, which is good. Fits into the hole with a little bit of wiggle room. So once I apply glue and press her on home, the glue will expand the wood slightly and it'll make a nice fit, and I can get it nice and flat after I've installed it. So that's it. The mantle is done. The next step is to install it in the home.